My wife's lie was so much worse than my cheating. I don't know what to do. I'm the bad guy in this story. Or at least I was. I cheated on my wife. Not just any wife, but my wife who was battling a chronic illness, a woman who needed me more than ever. The guilt was eating me alive, so I did the only thing I could think of. I confessed. I braced for the end of my marriage, for the righteous anger I deserved. But I didn't get anger. I got a confession of her own. A secret so dark and twisted, it made my betrayal look like a footnote. And now, standing in the wreckage of our life together, I'm forced to ask the one question I never thought I would. Who is the real villain here? I never thought I'd be that guy. The one who cheats on his wife. But life, it turns out, has a twisted sense of humor, and it doesn't care about the kind of person you think you are. At 32, I feel like I'm living in a nightmare I can't wake up from. It all started in 2019, a year of golden light and promise. She was everything, a vibrant force of nature. We built a world together, a small, perfect universe that revolved around us. We planned our wedding, and not for a second did I hesitate. She was my dream, and I was going to be her rock, her partner, her everything. I meant every vow in my heart. I was going to be there for her, in sickness and in health. I just never imagined in sickness would come so soon, or that it would look like this. A year and a half ago, her body betrayed her. A chronic illness, a thief in the night that stole her energy, her vibrancy, and the future we had meticulously planned. There's no cure, only a grueling regimen of treatments with side effects that felt like a second punishment. The medications bloated her body, causing her to gain a significant amount of weight. It was a terrible time, a crucible of pain, but it was nothing compared to what she was going through. I watched the woman I love fade, replaced by a stranger trapped in a body she didn't recognize. Her cheerleader, her nurse. I poured every ounce of my being into her care, so much so that I forgot to care for myself. As a Latino man, I was raised with a certain joie de vivre, a resilience that had seen me through tough times. I was always the happy one, the one with a joke on my lips. But this was different. It was a slow, creeping poison. I didn't recognize the symptoms. Friends would ask if I was okay, noting the shadows under my eyes, the forced nature of my smile. I'd wave them off, insisting I was fine, just tired. Depression was a word for other people, a weakness I couldn't afford. My goal was singular, to help her heal. I didn't realize that in focusing all my light on her, I was casting myself into a deep, dark void. The loneliness was suffocating, even when she was in the same room. The change in her appearance, while I tried to ignore it, created a chasm between us. I felt guilty for even noticing it, for the flicker of disappointment I couldn't suppress. It was in this fragile, broken state that my own betrayal began. At work, a new presence started to invade my carefully constructed walls. She was persistent, finding small cracks in my armor and slipping through. And for the first time, I let her in. I accept full responsibility. It was my choice, my failure. But for 2 weeks, the guilt was a physical weight, a constant, gnawing ache in my chest. I knew I couldn't live with it. I loved my wife, and the only thing I could think to do was to confess, to rip the bandage off and face the consequences, whatever they may be. I thought I was lifting a single, heavy stone to clear my conscience. I had no idea I was about to unleash an entire nest of worms. The words felt like glass in my throat as I finally confessed. I braced for the storm, for the tears, the screaming, the shattering of our world. I expected her to throw things, to tell me to get out, to call me every vile name in the book. And honestly, I would have taken it. I would have accepted any punishment as my just deserts. But the reaction I got was something I never could have anticipated in a million years. She was quiet, eerily so. Her face, usually a canvas of pain, was now a mask of something else, something unreadable. After a long, heavy silence that stretched into eternity, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at me, her eyes hollow, and she began to speak. But her words weren't about my infidelity. They were about her own. She started with her childhood, a story I thought I knew. I knew her parents were controlling, religious, and rigid. I knew they ran their household with an iron fist. But what I didn't know was how their suffocating control had shaped her, had taught her to become a master of deception, a skilled liar out of sheer necessity. To survive their constant scrutiny, She had constructed a web of falsehoods, a secret life hidden just beneath the surface of the obedient daughter they thought they had. And then she dropped the first bombshell. At 16, a child still navigating the treacherous waters of high school, she had been in a relationship with one of her teachers. He wasn't just a few years older. He was a man in his late 30s, 20 years her senior. This wasn't a fleeting crush. It was a full-blown relationship that had lasted for 2 years. 2 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. The image of my wife, the woman I saw as a pure, innocent soul, as a victim of circumstance, was shattered. In its place was a teenager, manipulated and abused by a figure of authority, a man who was supposed to protect her, not prey on her. The revelation tore me apart, not just because of the horror of what she had endured, but because of the sheer, monumental scale of the secret she had kept. For over a decade, this had been buried inside her. A dark truth she had never shared with me, the person she promised to share everything with. I was reeling, my mind struggling to process the information. My own transgression, which had felt so monumental just moments before, suddenly seemed to shrink in the shadow of her confession. I didn't know what I was feeling. Was it anger at her for not telling me? Was it a protective rage towards the man who had done this? Was it disappointment? Disgust? It was a toxic cocktail of all of them, swirling inside me, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. And just as I thought I had heard the worst of it, she paused, took a deep breath, and told me there was more. My mind was a battlefield. The image of my 16-year-old wife, vulnerable and manipulated, warred with the image of the woman sitting in front of me, a stranger who had been living a double life. I was trying to find a foothold, a way to process the first earth-shattering revelation, when she delivered the second. This one wasn't from her distant past. This one was from our past. It happened before we got married, during a time when I was juggling college and a demanding job. I remembered that period well. I was stretched thin, constantly exhausted, my focus split between a mountain of textbooks and the need to keep a roof over our heads. I told myself I was doing it for us, for our future. But as she spoke, I realized that in my quest to build our life, I had inadvertently neglected the person I was building it with. She told me she felt lonely, that my constant absence created a void she desperately needed to fill. So, she looked for attention elsewhere. She found it with a coworker. The story came out in a rush, a jumble of justifications and half-truths. She said they met at a park one day, a seemingly innocent encounter. Then, another day, she went to his apartment. This was the point where my blood ran cold. She swore, with a desperation that felt more like self-preservation than sincerity, that nothing happened. She claimed the moment she saw his child in the apartment, she was overwhelmed with guilt and left. She denied they even kissed, painting herself as a woman who had teetered on the edge of infidelity but had pulled back at the last second. She presented it as a moment of weakness, a test of her character that she had ultimately passed. But my instincts, which had been dormant for so long under the weight of my depression, were screaming at me. It was a story that felt too neat, too convenient. The sudden appearance of the child, the hasty exit, the claim of not even a single kiss. It felt like a script, a carefully constructed narrative to minimize the damage. In my mind, the worst-case scenario played out on a loop, a vivid, torturous film of her betrayal. I felt a strange, dark sense of justification creep in. A twisted part of my brain, the part that was trying to make sense of this chaos, came up with a chilling equation. If they had fornicated, then my own sin was forgiven. If she had crossed that ultimate line, then my transgression was just an eye for an eye, a terrible, karmic balancing act. And in that moment, I made a conscious decision. I decided to forgive the betrayal, at least the physical act of it. I would accept her version of events, even if every fiber of my being told me it was a lie. But there was one thing I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could never forgive: the lies. For years, she had deceived her family about the teacher. And now, I realized she had deceived me too. I wasn't just a husband who had been cheated on. I was a victim of manipulation, deception, and betrayal, all at once. The foundation of our marriage, built on what I thought was complete honesty, was nothing more than a foundation of sand. Confronting her was like trying to catch smoke. When I pressed her for details, for the full, unvarnished truth about her coworker, her story began to shift. It was subtle at first. A small detail here, a changed timeline there. But with each new version, the cracks in her narrative widened into chasms. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that she was lying to me again. The woman I loved, the woman I had pledged my life to, was a master illusionist, and I was her willing audience for years. What followed were 3 of the most agonizing days of my life. It became a twisted, daily ritual. She would offer a new piece of the story, a slightly more damning admission, as if testing the waters to see what I could handle. Each new confession was a betrayal in itself, a fresh wound on top of the old ones. First, she admitted they kissed, but it was just once. Then, it was more than once. Then, she admitted they had gone further, but she stopped it before it went all the way. The story kept evolving, each new version chipping away at what little trust one had left. It was a slow, torturous drip feed of the truth, and with every drop, my love for her curdled a little more. How could I believe anything she said? How could I build a future with someone whose past was a constantly shifting landscape of lies? I would have preferred she had told me the whole, ugly truth before we got married. It would have been a knife to the heart, but it would have been an honest wound. Instead, she chose to be selfish, to protect herself at the expense of my right to know who I was marrying. The lies were no longer just about her actions, they were about her character. They were a fundamental part of who she was. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, a new, fierce resolve began to burn within me. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about the teacher. The 16-year-old girl she used to be, the one who was abused and manipulated, deserved justice. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that she had to file a police report against him. I couldn't bear the thought of him still out there, potentially preying on other young girls. She was hesitant, scared. She talked about her past, about how she had been a teenager craving attention from parents who were overwhelmed with caring for another child with a disability. She described how they had given her control and rejection instead of love and support. I understood that her past trauma had shaped her, but I also knew that she was a 28-year-old woman now, not a helpless child. Her past was her story to tell, but her present inaction was a choice. The fact that she hadn't reported him, even after all these years, felt like another betrayal, not just to me, but to her younger self and to any potential future victims. After days of pressure, she finally agreed. She told her parents, who in turn told her siblings. The secret was out, but instead of feeling relief, I felt like an outsider in a family drama I had unwillingly been cast in. I didn't even want to go back to that house anymore. It was no longer a home, it was a crime scene. The chaos in her family's home became a catalyst for me. I knew I couldn't fix her, her past, or her family. The only thing I could control was myself. I was drowning, and I needed a lifeline. I started seeing a therapist, hoping to find a map through the wreckage of my life. The sessions were a revelation. It was there, in a quiet, sterile office, that I finally put a name to the monster that had been haunting me for over a year: depression. Acknowledging it was like taking a deep breath after being underwater for a long time. It didn't solve my problems, but it gave me a framework to understand them. The therapist helped me see the toll that being a caregiver had taken, the way I had sacrificed my own mental health on the altar of her recovery. But while the therapy gave me clarity, it didn't give me the answers I craved. A psychologist can offer tools and perspectives, but they can't tell you whether to stay or go, whether to forgive or forget. I knew I had to walk this final part of the road on my own. I started to reclaim my life, piece by piece. I went back to the gym, the sweat and iron, a physical manifestation of the strength I was trying to build back on the inside. With each rep, with each drop of sweat, I felt a little more in control. I reconnected with my parents, my sisters, and my friends, the people who had been on the periphery while I was lost in my caregiving fog. Their unwavering support was a balm to my wounded soul. I was starting to feel like myself again, the happy, resilient Latino man I used to be, but with a new, harder edge. I was learning to put myself first, a concept that had been foreign to me for so long. I was learning to recognize the signs of manipulation, to trust my gut when something felt off. The fog of depression was lifting, and for the first time in a long time, I could see the path ahead, even if I didn't know where it led. But even as I rebuilt my own foundation, the problem of her remained. The lies were etched into my memory like scars, ugly, and permanent. They bothered me when I woke up in the morning and when I tried to sleep at night. I would try to push them away, to focus on my progress, but they would always creep back in. I was getting stronger, but I was still tethered to her, to our shared history, to the wreckage of our marriage. I had the experience now, the bitter knowledge of what it felt like to be manipulated and betrayed. I was no longer naive. But this newfound wisdom came with a heavy price. I looked at her, and I didn't see the woman I fell in love with. I saw a stranger, a puzzle box of secrets and lies that I wasn't sure I had the energy to solve anymore. She said she wanted to be a better person, that she was willing to do the work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that her desire to change was tied to me. Was she truly trying to become a better person for herself? Or was she just trying to rescue the love she had lost, to use me because she knew I could be a good, stable husband? The question hung in the air between us, a silent, unbridgeable gap. I was a different man now. The gym had chiseled my body, and therapy had sharpened my mind. I was no longer the depressed, doormat husband who had let his world revolve around someone else's sickness. I was prepared, guarded. And this new perspective allowed me to see our situation with a brutal, unflinching clarity. The central question that consumed my every waking moment was forgiveness. Could I forgive her? Did I even want to? The more I thought about it, the more I realized the issue wasn't just about her actions. It was about the fundamental difference in our character that had been exposed. When I cheated, the guilt was an all-consuming fire. It ate me alive from the inside out. For 2 weeks, I was a mess, a walking bundle of remorse and self-loathing. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. The only thing I could think about was the pain I had caused her and the need to unburden my soul, even if it meant losing her. My confession was an act of selfishness, yes, but it was also an act of love. I couldn't live with the lie. Her reaction, or lack thereof, was a stark contrast. She didn't confess because she was eaten up by guilt. She confessed because she was caught. Because I had lifted the lid on my own sins, she felt she had no other choice. This realization was the ultimate betrayal. It told me everything I needed to know about how she truly saw me and our relationship. If I hadn't told her about my infidelity, she would have been perfectly content to take her secrets to her grave. She was fine with it. I wasn't. I had a conscience that wouldn't let me rest. She, it seemed, did not. This thought looped in my head, a toxic mantra that poisoned any chance of reconciliation. I don't believe the story she's telling me about her coworker. I think she's still hiding more, still minimizing the truth to make herself look better. How can I build a future with someone I don't believe? How can I trust a person whose default setting is deception? She says she loves me, but her actions tell a different story. Her love is conditional, a performance designed to keep me in her life. She's not sorry for what she did. She's sorry she got caught. She's not afraid of losing my love. She's afraid of losing the stability and security I provide. I look at her, and I feel a confusing mix of pity and resentment. I pity the broken girl who was abused by her teacher, who was so starved for affection that she sought it in all the wrong places. But I resent the woman she became, the woman who lied to me, who manipulated me, who made a mockery of our vows. She doesn't deserve my forgiveness. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't just for the other person, it's for yourself. It's about letting go of the anger so it no longer has power over you. But in this case, the anger feels like a shield. It's the only thing protecting me from being hurt again. To forgive her would be to let my guard down, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to do that again. So here I stand, at a crossroads in my life, with two very different paths stretching out before me. Behind me lies the wreckage of my marriage, a landscape of broken promises and shattered trust. In front of me, one path leads back to her, a difficult, uncertain road paved with the ghosts of her lies. The other path leads away, into the unknown, a future where I am alone but free. I'm no longer paralyzed by depression or manipulated by her deceit. I am stronger, clearer, and more self-aware than I have ever been. I have my family, my friends, and a renewed sense of self-worth. I have survived the worst storm of my life, and I am still standing. But the question of what to do next remains, a heavy weight on my soul. Do I still love her? Or am I just afraid of being alone? Am I afraid of losing the idea of her, the memory of the woman I thought she was? The lines are so blurred now. I can't tell where one emotion ends and the other begins. I know I don't love the person she has revealed herself to be. I don't love the liar, the manipulator, the woman who could carry such monumental secrets for so long. But a part of me still aches for the woman I fell in love with, the vibrant, dream-filled girl who captured my heart. Is she still in there somewhere, buried under layers of trauma and deceit? Or was she ever real to begin with? I've spent so long putting her first, sacrificing my own happiness for hers, that I've forgotten what it's like to just be. To not have this constant, gnawing pain in my chest. To not have to second-guess every word, every look. A psychologist can't give me the answer. My friends can offer support, but they can't walk this path for me. This is a decision I have to make on my own. But I'm tired of being alone with these thoughts. I'm tired of the anger and the pain that clings to me like a second skin. I need to hear from people who have been here, who have stood at this same crossroads. People who have experience with this kind of profound betrayal. If you think you can help, if you have a kind word or a piece of hard-won wisdom to share, please leave a comment. I need to know if it's possible to forgive the unforgivable. I need to know if love can truly conquer a foundation of lies. I need to know if I should try to rebuild, or if I should just walk away and never look back. Your advice could be the compass I need to find my way.